Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and that was Wrong Turn by the Tambo Rays. Anyway, I'm your host, Jell, and this, right now, is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. And we love to kick the show off by, well, talking about new releases for this week and next week, and what anime are coming to theaters, because that's bit of a thing. Oh, geez. Microphone's running away from me. Sorry about that if that made any weird noises. Probably did. Anyway, okay, so PlayStation 4. What came out on that? Well, first of all, 8-Bit Adventure Anthology Volume 1. I admit I have no clue what that is. Beast Quest, which I think is based on a series of books. There's a game here just listed as Ben 10. No subtitle, just a Ben 10 game came out? Okay, fine. Bubsy the Woolies Strike Back came out for PlayStation 4 and a number of other consoles. Yes, new Bubsy game. We'll talk a little bit about that in later on the show. Dead Hungry, which is a PlayStation VR game where you have to make food for hungry zombies and throw it at them. It looks kind of fun. Let's see, it says the Final Fantasy 15 multiplayer expansion came out, but it did not. Let's see, Rabby Reeby, which is a side-scrolling adventure game involving bunny girls. Rugby 18. Spin Tires Mud Runner. Steven Universe Save the Light. Stifled, and believe it or not, Summon Night 6 Lost Borders actually managed to come out after a year of classic Way Forward delays. Please enjoy the terrible dub. I'm not happy about that dub. Way Forward's still gonna Way Forward. I'm sorry, I said Way Forward. Way Forward's a great company. No, Working Designs. I'm getting my companies confused. It is a Working Designs release. Way Forward, they do good stuff. I have a love-hate relationship with Working Designs, which actually went out of business and now they're back as Gaijin Works. I'm sorry. Working Designs. Typical Working Designs release, Summon Night 6. And yes, that does mean that if you buy the physical edition, it is a special edition with a big fancy box that comes with a bunch of extra crap. Because Working Designs. Working Designs. Use the right words. Okay, moving on. Xbox One, what'd you get? Xbox One got 8-Bit Adventure Anthology Volume 1, Beast Quest Dead Exit. Disneyland Adventures, which, yes, that was that Kinect game where you stick your arms out and fly. Apparently, it has been redone for Xbox One with the Kinect controls no longer required, if not outright removed? Let me check the message board real quick. Yeah, I don't know if that has actual Kinect controls or if they just outright removed them. Anyway, Dying Reborn was also released on Xbox One, which was a weird Chinese, I think, made horror game that has a VR version on PlayStation 4? Whatever. Maria the Witch came out for Xbox One, along with Numantia. Rugby 18. Also, Rush, a Disney Pixar adventure, which was also an Xbox 360 Kinect game, now ported to Xbox One with Kinect controls no longer required, if not outright removed. It's hard to find any information on this. I've been trying to look it up because I'm fascinated by that. Anyway, Spin Tires Mud Runner came out, along with Zoo Tycoon Ultimate Animal Collection. Okay. Moving on, Nintendo Switch. Cartoon Network Battle Chasers, Monopoly for Nintendo Switch, Monster Jam Crush It, and Perception all came out. I'm forgetting to do... Wow, I'm sorry. I'm out of it. I'm forgetting to mention the games that are coming out later in the week as well. As tomorrow, the Switch is getting Arcade Archives Neo Geo Art of Fighting 3, Chess Ultra, Morphight, Sparkle 2 Evo, Super Beat Sports, which is like a multiplayer sports version of Rhythm Heaven, and Wheels of Aurelia. That's an interesting sounding game. Let me back up. PlayStation 4 coming out later this week. I'm so sorry I forgot this. Call of Duty World War II will be on Friday, along with .hack GU Last Recode, which snuck up on me, and I'm not sure if I want that or not. .hack GU Last Recode is it is a port of all 3 volumes of .hack GU to PlayStation 4 with enhanced gameplay, along with a brand new epilogue volume, a volume 4 to Dot Hack GU. So even if you played all 3 Dot Hack GUs, there is more new content added to it, and that's really neat. Anyway, on Xbox One later in the week, they're getting Steven Universe Save the Light on Friday, along with Call of Duty World War II and 99 Vitas. Now then, let us move right along. On 3DS, we got Creeping Terror, and tomorrow, Phil's Epic Philippix Adventure comes out for 3DS. Okay. And on PlayStation Vita, Pox Nora, Rabby Ribby, and Summon Night 6 Lost Borders, and apparently today, Sokoban Next came out. Now then, what's coming out next week? Well, next week for PlayStation 4, America's Greatest Game Shows, Wheels of Fortune and Jeopardy! Comes out. Wow, double pack, that's a thing. ATV Drift and Tricks. Supposedly it says Blue Reflection, but that game already came out. I'm getting these from Game FAQs if you're wondering. Hand of Fate 2, whatever that is. Hitman Game of the Year Edition. Horizon Zero Dawn, The Frozen Wilds, which is an expansion pack for that, and I thought that already came out, but I guess not. Jeopardy! Oh, Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune are being released separately as well if you only want one of them. Anyway, League of War VR Arena, which is some kind of, like, real-time strategy VR game, but it can be played outside of VR, and you can actually do VR versus a non-VR player since you have 2 separate screens. That's a thing they can do sometime. Need for Speed Payback Deluxe Edition. The Elder Scrolls Online Clockwork City, along with Sonic Forces and Sonic Forces Episode Shadow DLC, which will be coming out for it. And this is peculiar. It says Senran Kagura, Estival Versus, and Shantae Half Genie Hero come out next week, except both of those are things that are out and have been out since, like, summer. So, I don't know what's up with that. Anyway, later in the week, Siberia 3 and Automaton with a Plan and Need for Speed Payback come out. I guess the deluxe edition hits first, or maybe it's just listed weird. Whatever. Anyway, moving on. Also next week, Xbox One is getting America's Greatest Game Show, Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy! Assault Android Cactus finally hits the Xbox One. It's a twin-stick shooter with really cute characters. Hand of Fate 2, Hitman Game of the Year Edition. Minecraft includes Explorers Pack. Okay, I guess they're doing a new boxed release of Minecraft maybe for Xbox One? I don't know. Obviously, that's been out for a while. Need for Speed Payback Deluxe Edition, Outcast Second Contact, Sonic Forces, and Sonic Forces Episode Shadow. Super Lucky's Tale, a former VR game that has had its VR removed and has become an Xbox One console exclusive. Thanks a lot. The Elder Scrolls Online, Clockwork City, Wheel of Fortune, and Xbox One X comes out next week. Okay. That is, of course, the Xbox One that is more powerful. I thought that had already come out, but I guess it hadn't. I admit I hadn't been paying too close of attention to that. So, next week you get the Xbox One X. It's like an Xbox One, except more powerful, and will make certain games look better. Take it or leave it. Moving on, 911 Operator, Siberia 3, and Automaton with a Plan, Need for Speed Payback, and Whoppo come out next week for Xbox One. Moving along, Nintendo Switch, what are you getting next week? Nintendo Switch is getting Farming Simulator Nintendo Switch Edition, Heroes of the Monkey Tavern, Sonic Forces and Sonic Forces Episode Shadow, Cat Quest Doom, and Snipper Clips Plus Cut It Out Together. Is that actually, yeah, no, there is going to be a, the new Doom is coming to Switch. You'll be able to play that portably. Cool. Kind of interested in that as a portable game. Anyway, next week for the 3DS, Mario Party The Top 100, which if I recall correctly, is a collection of like the top 100 minigames from all the Mario parties, like all collected together, which makes me wonder, why isn't this on Switch? It seems like a really obvious shoo-in for a Switch game, but whatever. Also, Minecraft New Nintendo 3DS Edition comes out next week, so there will be a 3DS version, a new 3DS version of Minecraft. Remember they released that newer 3DS that's a little bit more powerful and there weren't very many exclusives for it? Yeah, that one. Anyway, PlayStation Vita is getting Maldita Castle EX Cursed Castillo, which I think was a indie Ghosts and Goblins clone, if I recall correctly, or was it more Castlevania? Let me check that real quick if it was more Ghosts and Goblins or Castlevania. More Ghosts and Goblins. That's what I thought. So that concludes the new game releases, although, where is it? 17th. So yeah, week after next is when Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon come out. So I know a lot of people might care about that. Anyway, moving right along. What anime are in theaters? Speaking of Pokemon, Pokemon the movie I Choose You, a retelling of like the first couple episodes of Pokemon in movie form, minus Misty and Brock. They're replaced with different characters. That's probably why they came back in the Pokemon Sun and Moon TV series, was because there was a huge backlash about that. But anyway, Pokemon the movie I Choose You is a new Pokemon movie based on the first couple episodes of the TV show, movie-fied, definitely drastically reanimated, and that will be in theaters Sunday, November 6th, and Sunday, November 5th, and Monday, November 6th. And yeah, it's like, I think it's a Fathom event type deal, because I am seeing only one showtime for each of those. On Sunday, it will be at 12:55 p.m., and on Monday, it will be at 7 p.m. So there you go. And speaking of Fathom events, on November 26th, 27th, and 29th, Howl's Moving Castle will be coming to theaters again as part of G-Kids' Studio Ghibli Fest 2017. So there you go. Haven't seen any other anime hitting theaters, but I might have missed something, and we will see what happens with all of those. Anyway, that concludes our new game releases and what anime are coming to theaters. We will continue the show talking more about all sorts of things. You know, the Paris Games Week is going down right now in, well, Paris. And there's a little bit of news coming out from that. Not nearly as much as I would have liked, but we will certainly talk about that. We'll talk about other video game news and so on. But for right now, we're going to take a short break. Coming up next is The Way Life Goes by Lil Uzi Vert and Meek Mill here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more GameBabble Live. Thank you for... That was The Way Life Goes by Lil Uzi Vert and Meek Mill here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. So, finally managed to find an answer to my question about Disneyland Adventures and Rush, a Disney Pixar adventure, getting re-released on Xbox One out of nowhere. Yes, and Windows 10. Yes, they do not require Kinect anymore. These are ports of old Kinect games on 360 to Xbox One that came out of nowhere. I guess they realized they didn't have enough E-rated games for the Xbox One and wanted to get something out there for Christmas. They do not require the Kinect, but Kinect support is still in there. Apparently, they also support 4K and HDR because they're just ports of 360 games. But, according to the message board on Game FAQs, people were actually reporting performance problems in Disneyland Adventures. Really? Performance problems in Disneyland Adventures, an Xbox 360 game that has been ported to Xbox One. That's a little bit striking to me. Anyway, so Paris Games Week is going down right now. They're showing off some new games and stuff, and Sony promised that they would be showing a bunch of things, but not a lot of stuff people are really excited for. The main girl from Horizon Zero Dawn will be showing up in the new Monster Hunter game. They showed off a bunch of PlayStation VR games, except that the trailers were useless for most of them. There's a really cool hover skating game that looks really fun, but a lot of the trailers, like, this is blowing my mind how bad these trailers were. Because a lot of them is just, like, little clips of the game with a bunch of text on screen that says things like, survive. And it's only now that I realize that doesn't tell me anything about the game. Survive. Survive could be applied to literally any game that you can lose in. You could apply survive to Dance Dance Revolution, if you want to. I'd assume it's a survival game because it says survival, but that doesn't actually mean anything. And, like, one of the games was called Megalith, and people are like, oh, it's a hero shooter for PlayStation VR, and I'm just sitting there like, how do you know that? The only thing they showed in the trailer was a big monster coming out of a cave, and then it shows first person, the monster looks at his hands. That was all they showed, other than a bunch of text about, Titans fighting to become gods. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything about the genre. That was the most useless trailer ever. But what apparently wasn't a useless trailer, I admit I didn't watch it, was The Last of Us 2 was announced. So that's like your big announcement out of Paris Games Week. Last of Us 2 is coming. Apparently the trailer was super violent, and a bunch of people got very upset about how violent it was. Apparently forgetting it was the post-apocalypse where people don't care about your feelings and horrible violent things are going to happen, especially in an M-rated game, about how harsh and horrible the post-apocalyptic zombie world is. And yeah, one of the head guys at Sony defended the trailer and said, yeah, no, we support games for all audiences, and this is an M-rated game. Deal with it. And I'm like, good, yes, please do. We will discuss more about this later, but coming up, I know, it's a little bit of a short thing here, but we will get back to talking about Paris Games Week and all sorts of games, including Super Mario Odyssey and Sonic Forces and the new Bubsy game. Woo, platformers. We will talk more about all of those after yet another short break. My apologies, on a little bit of schedule here. Coming up next is Thunder by Imagine Dragons here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more GameBabble Live. That was Pieces by Rob Thomas here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Or from 1 to 3 p.m. I'm sorry, old times. 1 to 3 p.m. Sorry for that extra long break. Anyway, let us get back to talking about what we were talking about, which was, hey, Paris Games Week's going down. Last of Us 2 was indeed announced. There's a trailer that is out and about, and apparently very graphic. But I would say the big news over this past week is Super Mario Odyssey hit, which I think caught everyone off guard. Because, you know, hey, there's a new Mario game in the works. We were like, okay, so we're going to be waiting a while for this. And no, it's here. It's on the Switch, and it is pretty darn great. Money's been tight for me, so I haven't been able to pick it up myself, but I was able to swing over to a friend's house and give a copy a try. And yeah, the game is pretty darn great. On top of me, like, watching a bunch of streams of it. Basically, the deal with Super Mario Odyssey, it's kind of funny. After Mario Galaxy, everyone was like, where does Mario go from here? Where do you go after space? Well, Mario Odyssey shows just how unlimited Mario can be. Because the whole idea is that you go to all these different kingdoms that are pretty much entirely different worlds. You know, you start off in the Hat Kingdom, which is weirdly spooky, because, like, all the hats are, like, possessed by ghosts, and it looks kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas, and then there's, like, a world with realistic dinosaurs in it, and then you go to, like, this Dia de los Muertos mixed with Egypt-themed desert world that is also frozen, and then after that, there's a ton of worlds. The one that really caught a lot of people's eyes and that Nintendo showed off a bunch was the Metro Kingdom, a.k.a. New Donk City, which is essentially Brooklyn. It is essentially Mario going back to Brooklyn finally, and it is based on just the real world with relatively realistic people and environment, and Mario's there, and it's a city, but all the street names and store names are based on Donkey Kong. And it's just freaking nuts. And one of the other features that gets used a lot in the game, and is very much taken from Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, so that's the 8-bit parts. You see, throughout the game, you'll find these pixelated warp pipes that you walk into them, and Mario will turn 8-bit, and you will play essentially a classic Mario Brothers style stage on a wall, and then you go into another warp pipe and you pop out and you're 3D again. It's like, okay, that's weird and random. But there is a major emphasis on exploration with all these little open mini worlds to run around and explore, all chock full of power moons, which are essentially these stars you are collecting in this game. Your goal, of course, is to collect enough power moons to enhance this weird ship you have called the Odyssey in order to allow it to go to more and more new worlds. And there's a lot of power moons to find. They're hidden everywhere. You'll just bump into them. There's just a major emphasis on just paying attention and exploring. Like, there are Nintendogs, essentially, scattered throughout the world, and one of them will actually start barking and running, and if you're like, I wonder what this dog's up to, it will start sniffing the ground and trying to dig around an area, and if you butt slam that spot on the ground, you will find a power moon. You know, that's how you find one of them, and, like, your only hint is just, you notice this random dog in the middle of a stage acting strange. There's more obvious power moons as well for beating bosses and going through things. Generally speaking, each stage opens with a very scripted, here is a problem, let's solve it, fight a boss battle sort of introduction, and then after that they all open up. The game, it looks like it can be beaten, what would I estimate the playtime? 10, 11 hours? It takes a decent, but for a platformer it's pretty long, but the post-game is huge. By post-game, I mean after you've beaten the game, you have a whole lot more game to go to. New worlds open up, there's new power moons to find, there's so much more to explore, and there's a lot there, and it looks like it's going to keep people busy for many hours to collect all the power moons. I'm hearing over 600. One website was reporting like 900 power moons, but I think that's including sort of the achievement power moons. So, yeah, there's like at least 600 different power moons to find, and everyone is going to be scrambling to find all of them. I wonder if anyone's actually found all of them yet. I think maybe one or two people have. But yeah, there's a lot there, and in many ways, Super Mario Odyssey looks like the true successor to Mario 64. It has the more open, adventure-y worlds, whereas Galaxy was really, really good, but it was a little bit more linear. This one's a little bit more open. And yeah, just the creativity with the worlds and what they do in them. Not to mention Mario's whole new ability here is that he has this, like, hat with a ghost in it that he can throw at people, and it's a fantastic weapon. But on top of that, if you find an enemy that isn't wearing a hat, you can usually throw the hat at them to possess them, and then each enemy presents its own unique gameplay gimmick. So there are times where you'll where you have to possess a T-Rex to destroy walls, or possess a Bullet Bill and try to fly it around without crashing. And, there's these weird caterpillar enemies that stretch out all weird-like, and you'll have to use them to navigate the environment. Shoot, you can even possess... You know how in Mario they have these things called potaboos, which are fireballs with eyes? You can possess one of those in order to get over lava. It opens up so many new goofy, gimmicky gameplay possibilities, which has become sort of a Mario staple, where it's like, hey, this stage has a unique twist that is used in this stage and maybe one other stage, and that's it. And there's just a boatload of those. It is a very, very nice game from everything I've seen. Controls great. And really shows the potential of the Switch. Because, you're playing this, it's like, okay, this game looks great, this game plays great, it's nice to see that on my TV. And then you realize, wait a second, I can take this on the go with me. I could just slap the controllers on the side of the system, and it's portable. Because that was the thing I noticed when I was trying my friend's copy. I was like, wait a second, I can just play this portably. This is amazing. Like that, and that is really what, it's one of those things where you really start to realize the potential the Nintendo Switch has. Now, what timing, for Bubsy and Sonic to try to come out. Yes, there is a new Bubsy game. It has been released on PS4, I think Xbox One, almost definitely PC, and I'm pretty certain Switch as well. I need to double-check all of that, though. But new Bubsy game is out. If you don't recall, Bubsy was the try-hardest of try-hard platformer characters of the 90s. No one liked Bubsy. He was Bobcat, he had an exclamation point shirt. Main claim to fame for the game was the fact that it had voice samples for him to make terrible jokes. And the game was very much desperately trying to be Sonic. A lot of people say the first Bubsy game is kind of okay. But the games got progressively worse with each subsequent game, including there is an Atari Jaguar exclusive Bubsy game, which now I realize I need to buy that. But, each subsequent Bubsy game kind of got worse until it climaxed with Bubsy 3D, the infamous Bubsy 3D. One of the earliest 3D platformers. It looks like a pile of garbage. It plays like a pile of garbage. The game is legendary for being bad, and it is what finished off the Bubsy franchise. That and I don't know what happened to the company Accolade that made it. I think they went under and some Chinese company bought the rights to their stuff. Anyway, the new one is apparently made by the same people who made the recent Guiana Sisters games, which, who is that a story for you? The Great Guiana Sisters was a Commodore 64 Super Mario Brothers clone that actually got sued by Nintendo, but has become sort of a cult classic just due to the nature of it, and recent Guiana Sisters games have experimented with little twists on the formula and being, not just Mario, but yeah, there was a recent Guiana Sisters game called Twisted Dreams. It was made by this one company, and it was like Kickstarter, and it was fantastic. And that company got to do the new Bubsy game. And I'm hearing the game is pretty darn good, but it is also short. I actually haven't sat down and really watched any gameplay of it, but I was like, well, how short are we talking here? Let's get an estimate. So I looked up a playthrough on YouTube, and it was part 1, and then part 2 and ending. Combining the times, it was like an 18-minute and a 45-minute playthrough for the 2 parts. It is sounding like the game is about an hour long, maybe a little less. It's a little pricey. It's not a full-price game, but for a, downloadable game, it's a little on the high side. In fact, it is only slightly cheaper than Sonic Forces is going to launch at. And that is, that's awkward. Especially since Bubsy had a little trailer making fun of Sonic. It's like, yeah, ever hear of glass houses, Bubsy? So it's apparently an okay game, but the length does not justify the cost. It is looking like it is 1/3 as long as Sonic Forces, which brings us, of course, to Sonic Forces. Last week, in the middle of the show, I found out that a Sonic Forces demo had gone live. I streamed it almost immediately after the show, and OBS kept crashing, but I put the first chunk of it, which was me playing those 3 demo levels, up on the YouTube, and I was really impressed by it, which was a unique twist. Because after that demo came out, people immediately started complaining about how terrible the demo was and how the game was doomed. Now, the demo was bad. The demo for Sonic Forces was bad because it puts you on a 1-minute time limit. So you barely get into a stage and then it cuts you off. Or at least you think you barely get into a stage, because some Sonic speedrunners did sit down and beat all 3 stages within the 1-minute time limit, although they had to cheat for the custom character stage. Apparently, if you pause in the middle of the QTE sequence at this one specific time, it will freeze the timer, and you can actually play through the rest of the stage normally and beat it. Either way, it was a really weird design decision to put a 1-minute time limit on the demo that caused a bunch of people to say, oh, the demo is bad, which led a bunch of people to assuming the game was bad, and all sorts of doom and gloom everywhere. I sat down, I played the demo, and I said, you know what, this feels like it feels a little better than Sonic Generations, actually. If you like Sonic Colors and Generations, Sonic Forces is certainly looking like that. Now, while all this was going on, the PlayStation 4 demo also hit. By the way, these demos are only on the Japanese store. And to make things even weirder, the Switch demo is in Japanese only, but the PS4 demo is in English, even though they're both Japanese-only demos? Whatever, so I've played both demos, and we're running a little short on time before I have to take the next break, so I'll probably tell you a little more about that later. But, yeah, I've played both demos, and on top of all of this, they were both very good demos. On top of all this, though, apparently a few stores have broken Street Date on Sonic Forces. Not a lot, but there are some people who have gotten their hands on the game and played through the entire thing. So spoilers are currently abound on the internet. And, yeah, I was kind of curious. I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch, there's one video on YouTube of an hour and a half of the game. And I was like, I'm going to watch this, but skip all the cutscenes, which still wound up spoiling me on a few things. But it gave me a good idea of what we're looking at. And what I am going to say is that, and the leak, by the way, was of the Switch release. So the Switch release certainly looks like it maintains a stable frame rate throughout. It does not look that bad. We'll talk more about Switch versus PS4 versions after the break. But Switch release looked stable. The guy playing it looked like he had a good time playing it. Stages do look very short. It is looking like the game is 29 stages long and should clock in somewhere around 3 hours or a little less, which is about the length of Sonic Colors. I'm going to say maybe a little shorter than Sonic Colors, and definitely longer than Sonic Generations. So, yes, it's a short game, but the good news is that Sega is selling the game at a lower price point. Can't name any specifics, but yeah, Sonic Forces is not being sold at full price, in spite of the fact that it looks like it has quite a bit of interesting content and effort put into it. It is not going to be a full-price game, and like I said, it is only slightly more expensive than the new Bubsy game. And I think between the two, I would pick Sonic Forces every time. I would pick Sonic Forces twice every time, because I am having the darndest time deciding between the Switch and PS4 versions of the game. But we are going to take a short little break. Let me see here. So, coming up next is... let's see. Coming up next, we've got Beautiful Trauma by Pink here on 89.5 FM. KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more GameBabble Live when we get back from the very short break. I will talk more about Sonic Forces, the Switch versus the PlayStation 4 version, the pros and cons, what I think of all that. Talk a little bit more about that, and then we will be talking more about what's going on with the Switch, some more Paris Game Week announcements, and so on. But until then, please enjoy Beautiful Trauma by Pink here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much. That was Suit and Jacket by Judah and the Lion, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. Once again, I'm your host, Jell, and we last left off talking a little bit about Sonic Forces, which comes out next week on the 7th. I am very excited to play it, but of course, people are up in arms and freaking out about it because of reasons. Everyone has kind of an itchy trigger finger on Sonic Forces, and there's a good reason. Pretty much, 3D Sonic games have had a shaky history. A really shaky history. To the point where making fun of 3D Sonic games has become sort of a running joke. A running joke so old that even Bubsy is making it, which is a sign that your joke is old. But it is still a thing, and there's a reason for it. We spent years with these very shaky 3D Sonic games. And then Sonic Colors and Generations came out, and they were very nice, good games, and people liked them. And it was like, yay, 3D Sonic games are good again. Then Sonic Lost World happened for the Wii U, and it was neither bad nor good. Not a lot of people talk about Sonic Lost World. It may as well be called Sonic Lost Game, because no one talks about it. Sonic Lost World was just weird. It was very much, it was a very polished, well-made game, probably the least buggy Sonic game ever made, with a lot of great design ideas. It looked good, ran very smooth, but the game was ridiculously overcomplicated. Sonic was kind of trying to copy Mario with that game, where every stage, like I said with Mario Odyssey, every stage had a unique twist or gimmick or something to differentiate them. This works for Mario, because Mario is especially 3D Mario, it's a little slower paced, a little more exploration-y. You know, you can test the ground, you can take your time, you can figure things out and puzzle solve. That doesn't work for Sonic. Sonic is about going fast, and as such, you wind up slamming into stupid walls. They introduced way too many different enemy types that did not properly telegraph how to beat them, and it just, it never gelled together. Like, certain parts of Sonic Lost World were really good, certain parts were a little and it never came together as a complete game. No part of it ever felt like, there was nothing that really defined it. It's just the weirdest game. So it wasn't bad, it wasn't good. It was a bit of a stumble, and everyone has been waiting for what game comes after that. Unfortunately, Nintendo locked Sega into an exclusivity contract with the Wii U. Sega had to produce, like they struck some deal, and Nintendo paid Sega, and it was like, okay, the deal is you have to make, 3 or 4 exclusive Wii U Sonic games. And the Wii U didn't sell well, and so Sonic Lost World didn't sell well. And so Sega's like, well, crap, we don't want to put any actual effort into a Sonic game if it has to be Wii U exclusive. So they managed to get away with it by doing the 2 Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and of course, Sonic Boom. Now, while the TV show for Sonic Boom is great, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric on the Wii U is one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. It is absolutely abysmal. Sonic 2006 is a superior game, and I do not, for multiple reasons. There is, if you look back in the archives, there is footage of me when I rented Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric from Family Video. It is on my YouTube channel. Look up, GameBabble show on YouTube, and that game nearly drove me insane with how horrifyingly boring it was. But Sega didn't make that game. That was made by Big Red Button, which was a bunch of ex-Naughty Dog developers. And it had a lot of problems. There were also the 2 portable ones, which were made by Sanzaru, which are the people who did the Sly Cooper game that wasn't made by Sucker Punch. I forget what it was called. I want to say Thieves in Time, but point was, Sanzaru made those, and they were okay. But the thing is, we haven't had a new, real, actual Sonic Team main Sega Sonic game since Sonic Lost World. So, we went from Sonic Generations, which was good, to Sonic Lost World, which was a stumble, and now it's been how many years since we've had a new 3D Sonic game? And the fandom, which, if you know, the Sonic fandom is kind of huge and obsessive, they're a little bit on edge because of this. Because they're like, oh crap, will the next game be good? Will the next game be bad? What does it all mean? This is the chance to redeem the franchise, or will they screw it up? So everyone has an itchy trigger finger, and everyone wants to, declare this game is great or this game is terrible. And it's bizarre. Some of the reactions I have seen with people just playing the demo and declaring, this game's terrible because it plays exactly like Sonic Generations in colors, which was good. It's weird right now, okay? And there are so many people who would like to just bash the game. And what makes it even worse is, of course, Sonic Mania came out earlier. If you're unfamiliar, Sonic Mania is a classic 2D Sonic game made pretty much by hardcore fans that Sega gave the okay to. Sega was, his guy name was Christian Whitehead. And he he did the remake of Sonic CD for Sega it was on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and on iPhone and Android and all that stuff. He did a fantastic remake of Sonic CD and knows the engine inside and out and got Sega to let him make a new Sonic game with Sonic Mania, which actually ties in with Forces, and it was phenomenal. Like, a lot of people are considering Sonic Mania to possibly be the best Sonic game ever made. And as such, it's like, we all know that the reviews for Sonic Forces are all going to be, the game's not as good as Sonic Mania. And so that has people even more on edge, and it is absurd. And with everyone's love of bashing this series, I'm thinking it's time I made a move again. I've been updating the GameBabble blog recently, which is gamebabble.wordpress.com, and decided against doing the daily updates, because that just winds up with rushed, horrible articles, but I am updating that again, and if you are at all a fan of the Sonic franchise, you might have actually stumbled across it, because many, many, many years ago, I published an article called Sonic and the Worst Fandom Ever, which surprisingly still gets a whole lot of hits and comments, and has been linked to on a number of different websites. Now, this article came from a place of love. Like, it was not, haha, let's point and laugh at the Sonic fandom. It was okay, the Sonic fandom is crazy and unpleasable. Let's take a minute to try to figure out why. And, I have to say, the Sonic fandom is no longer the worst fandom ever, because worse fandoms have shown up. But it was at the time. The time is funny sometimes. But I did write that article, and it got some traction. And I'm thinking, I have a feeling that both the Sonic fandom and the Sonic hatedom are both going to make complete fools of themselves after the release of Sonic Forces. So I'm going to wait a few weeks, see how this plays out. And I think I might actually have to write Sonic and the Worst Hatedom Ever, because the haters are just as bad as the fans. Mostly because their hatred doesn't come from a place of actual hate. Like, the fans' craziness comes from a place of actual love for the series. The hatedom's hate doesn't come from a place of actual hate. It comes from just a place of, LOL, that's the joke. 3D Sonic games are bad. And as someone who is a fan of a number of games that have gotten similar treatment, case in point, my favorite 3D fighter is Bloody Roar, I have zero tolerance for that, and I look forward to possibly tearing them to shreds. But we'll see. Maybe they won't act like idiots when Sonic Forces comes out. It'll be interesting to see. But I've been rambling about my own personal nonsense, a little bit of a fan retrospective here. What about the actual Sonic Forces demo? Because I mentioned the demo is out now on both Switch and PlayStation 4, only in Japan. But, make a Japanese account. You grab the demos. I've done that. And comparing the two, I have to say, I had heard that the Switch version of Sonic Forces had been downgraded, and I looked at early footage of the Switch version, and I was like, oh, this looks bad. Like, the textures were terrible, the frame rate was horrible and inconsistent. The Switch version of Sonic Forces looked bad, but then I played the demo, and it was fine. Like, I didn't even notice anything. I was like, this seems perfectly swell. Then I played the PlayStation 4 one, and I'm like, I don't really notice a difference. It wasn't until I played the PlayStation 4 and Switch versions side by side, one after another, that I'm like, oh, geez, there's a huge difference here. So it's a huge difference that doesn't make a lot of a difference. For starters, the Switch version is definitely lower resolution, significantly so. The textures are indeed worse, and there are less lighting effects. And on top of that, perhaps the biggest deal is that the PlayStation 4 version runs at a consistent 60 FPS, whereas the Switch version runs at a consistent 30 FPS. And I know a lot of people have said, I don't notice the difference between 60 and 30. And I will be honest, it is hard to notice it when they're separate. When you put them side by side, you can see the difference, and you can feel the difference. There is a definite difference between 60 FPS and 30 FPS when you put them side by side. The key question is consistency. A consistent frame rate is more important than a high frame rate. Like, if you had a frame rate that was 60 but sometimes dropped to 55 or 45 at times, that wouldn't be as good as a solid 30. And when you have a solid 30, just a flat, this runs at 30 period all the time, that's when it's actually hard to tell. That's the reason why you sometimes can tell, is a lot of the games that run at 30 FPS dip below 30 FPS frequently. But when you have a game that runs at a solid 30, yeah, it's a little harder to notice. And Sonic Forces, from what I've played, ran at a solid 30. From what I saw watching the first hour and a half of the game, from the leaks, which were of the Switch version, it looks like it keeps that solid 30 for the entire game. I did not notice any major frame rate drops. It looked very consistent. Maybe there's some minor ones, but the game definitely looks way more polished than the last demos we were seeing with the horrible frame rate drops. But here's the interesting thing about Sonic Forces on the Switch. I'd been playing it in normal mode for a while. I finally decided to play the Sonic Forces demo in portable mode, and that's the thing that makes the difference. Because all of a sudden, the lower resolution doesn't matter. The worse textures don't matter, because when you're playing on that smaller screen and everything gets squished together, it looks pretty much just as good as the PlayStation 4 version, and since it's a solid 30 FPS, it doesn't matter that it doesn't really matter on portable mode. So, the Switch version, if you want to play it on the go, is actually really nice, but the PlayStation 4 version represents a significant graphical upgrade, and that is the conundrum. Do I want to play Sonic Forces on the go as well as at home, or do I want to play it in its prettiest setting? And I am having the darndest time deciding. And thanks to its lower price point, I might actually attempt to do both. I'm way too excited for this game, and I cannot wait to play it. Again, stages look short. 29 stages, it looks like. It'll probably last around 3 hours, maybe a little less, so a little shorter than Sonic Colors, a bit longer than Sonic Generations. It plays very much like Colors and Generation. And when you play the Avatar stages, use your freaking weapon. Because, of course, the new twist is, the game has the classic Sonic, modern Sonic thing, where classic Sonic plays pretty close to the old Sonic games, and modern Sonic is this 2D, 3D, hybrid, high-speed emphasis mode. And then they have this new mode where you play as your own custom character that uses Wispons, which are weapons based on the Wisp power-ups from Sonic Colors. And watching people play, they didn't use their Wispons nearly enough in the Avatar mode. And I bring that up because in Avatar mode, since you're not Sonic, you don't really have the homing attack. But you have something like a homing attack where you use a grappling hook. And it works pretty much the same as Sonic's homing attack, except it's way slower. And if you try to defeat all the enemies with your homing grappling hook attack, then, the Avatar feels like a crappier version of Sonic, with way too many enemies to beat up. Use the weapon. Use the Wispon. I'm currently in love with the Lightning Whip. I am definitely maining the Lightning Whip because that is just a melee weapon that has a huge arc and pushes you forward, so I can kind of use the Lightning Whip in midair to air dash, kind of. And it's like, Lightning Whip, that is my weapon of choice for Avatar mode. I think the demo lets you try 3 different weapons: the flamethrower, the hammer, and the Lightning Whip. Hammer is definitely the crappiest. It's kind of fun to use, but it's also kind of slow. Flamethrower is just sort of there. Lightning Whip is my baby. I am using that Lightning Whip. Totally on board with that. Anyway. Like I said, Some people have gotten their hands on the game early, and I was this close to hunting down an early copy of Sonic Forces. I was this close that I'm like, nope, because then I don't get the pre-order DLC and might not get Episode Shadow. Because, yes, the pre-order DLC, if you pre-order the game, you get a bunch of crossover costumes. There's a Jet Set Radio costume, there's a Super Monkey Ball costume, there is a Puyo Puyo costume, which is, of course, the one I'm interested in, and there's a Persona 5 costume, which is really awkward. But, okay, fine. And then Episode Shadow is going to be free DLC you can download on day one that contains, like, 3 or 4 stages where you play as Shadow, and it explains why Shadow is a villain again. And I know a lot of Shadow fans are very excited for that. Also, after you beat stages with Modern Sonic, you can replay them with Shadow as a bonus once you get that DLC. So a bunch of stuff to try to incentivize grabbing the game early, which is a thing a lot of publishers do now. I know a lot of people aren't too happy with pre-order culture, as they call it. And I have mixed feelings on it, because sometimes it's like, wow, you're cutting out a chunk of the game to try to push pre-orders. In other cases, I'm like, okay, this is just a nice bonus. Like, okay, these are just some costumes that they will probably sell separately later on down the line, but hey, you get them free if you grab the game, if you pre-order the game. The reason why companies do this is because when you pre-order games, especially at GameStop, that gives them an idea of how many copies they need to order for stock. It gives the publishers an early idea of how many people are interested in it and what kind of sales there are going to be. And often in the world of video games, most of the money is made in, like, the first month or two. Everything past that kind of doesn't matter. Game companies don't get any sort of kickback from when you purchase a game used. And so that's why they really try to push pre-orders and getting the game early. One thing I do like, a lot of companies for smaller games, instead of doing pre-order DLC, they do, like, limited time free DLC, where it's like, for the first month, here's this piece of DLC you can download completely for free as a bonus for getting the game early. Or some of them just, have those day one editions. Instead of a pre-order bonus, it's if you get this game early from the first print run, it comes with a little bonus thing in there. It's like, it's kind of nice. I kind of get it. I understand the reason why companies would push this. I also understand why it's kind of annoying to certain players. And yeah, that is certainly where we are at with that. Whew, that was a whole lot of talk about Sonic Forces. So how about we talk about something that isn't Sonic Forces? Back to Paris Games Week, where games are being announced all sorts of left and right. Number one, I mentioned Last of Us 2 was announced. That's a major thing. But also, Sucker Punch's next game has been announced. Speaking of them, they were the makers of Sly Cooper, as well as... oh, cripes, how did I forget that name? That open-world superhero game, the one that wasn't Prototype. Oh, starts with an I. I feel really dumb for forgetting this. This is why we have Google. PS4 Sucker Punch game. Hopefully it won't give me a game based on the movie. Infamous! There we go. Infamous! Yes, the makers of Sly Cooper and Infamous have announced their next game, which is going to be an open-world samurai game called Tsushima. And it looks like it's there. I have a lot of questions to ask about the game, which admittedly I haven't looked too far into. But I think it is going to have some stiff competition for me, because I don't care about polish. I bring that up because I'm a huge fan of a certain other open-world samurai game. It's called Way of the Samurai. And, that was a PS2 launch title. And there have been 4 Way of the Samurai games, with the 4th one being very rough and very buggy and very full of screen tearing. But oh, egad, is it fun. And Way of the Samurai, it's a hard act to follow, honestly. Because it's a different kind of open world game. A lot of open world games are about, look at this big, huge area you can explore, and there's just so much land to explore, and it's all empty, and there's not a lot you can do. Way of the Samurai was the complete opposite of that. All the Way of the Samurai games take place in one tiny little town over the course of a week. The games are incredibly short, but they are designed to be replayed over and over and over again because they're a bunch of plot branches. All your choices and decisions have effects which, make a difference in the outcome of the story, which, that's what Mass Effect said, except with Mass Effect and many other games that try to do this, it's hard to implement all of that because the games are so big and so long, and so there's only so much your choices can affect without complicating things for the developers. Way of the Samurai, since it is a game you can beat in a couple of hours, it is able to have your choices make a much bigger difference. And I actually remember, before Fable came out, back when it was called Project Ego, back when I was in high school, a friend of mine came up to me and was like, "Oh man, did you hear about this new game that's coming out on Xbox? It's going to be like Way of the Samurai, except it's going to be medieval and it's going to be way better." And then Fable comes out and I'm like, this is nice and all, but Way of the Samurai is better. And in the time it took for Fable to come out, Way of the Samurai 2 was made and released. And there was still like another year before Fable 1 came out. So it's already had one competitor. Can Tsushima, from the makers of Sly Cooper and Infamous, compete with Way of the Samurai? Will it do enough to differentiate itself? And the big question, what about the combat? Because the main thing that I love about Way of the Samurai was the combat, because it kind of played more like Bushido Blade than anything else, and there were a ton of different moves you could find in the earlier games. What moves you had were linked to what weapons you found. Like, you killed an enemy, and then you could take their sword, and that sword had their move list on it. In the later games, especially Way of the Samurai 4, the enemies would, the sword and the moveset were actually separate, and enemies would drop scrolls for their fighting style, and then you could mix and match the moves to make your own fighting style that you taught at your dojo. Way of the Samurai 4 was really cool, but that game is buggy and rough and full of screen tearing. I cannot emphasize that enough. That is a rough game, but if you can tolerate it, it is so much fun. If you like the ability to do dumb things and don't mind putting up with a lot of lack of polish with that game. So that's been a thing that's been announced, and I need to stop rambling for a minute and take a little bit of a break. So, let's see. So I think we are going to take a short break, and when we... Actually, let me see something. 1 second. Sorry for the lack of professionalism. I am going to put on Anna Ing by They Might Be Giants here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. And when we get back, I've got a bunch of other things to talk about, including more about the Switch, more about Paris Games Week, and some more obscure releases that I think will tickle your fancy. Until then, though, here's Anna Ing by They Might Be Giants here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. That was West Side by Fetty Wap featuring Snoop Dogg here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. And as we are coming up on the end of the show, that means we gotta speed run the rest of this news. So, Spelunky 2 was also announced to be coming out. They're working on a sequel to Spelunky, the beloved classic indie game that a lot of people like. And if you are sitting there going, getting Spelunky and Spelunker confused, Spelunker Party was released on Nintendo Switch recently. It is a completely different game, though likely inspired Spelunky. Anyway, moving right along, let's see. Sony really seems to be pushing a thing called PlayLink, which is some kind of system they have set up to hook your cell phones up to your PlayStation 4 and play games using your cell phone. I don't know how successful it'll be, but it could be pretty fun for party games. Mentioned that The Last of Us 2 was announced. Also, Metal Gear Solid 5 apparently just got a patch for the PlayStation 4 Pro to enhance its visuals and gameplay and stuff. Kind of weird for that to come out all of a sudden just right now. And are there any Full Metal Panic fans in the audience? Because there is a new Full Metal Panic game coming out. It is a strategy game. It is called Full Metal Panic Fight Who Dares Wins. And it will be getting an English release in Asia. This is a recent and kind of strange trend that's been going on, where games would not get a US release, but would be translated into English, and since the PlayStation 4 is region-free, you could just import a copy out of Hong Kong or Singapore and play it completely in English. This was what we had to do with Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball 3, because that was not getting released in the West for irritating reasons. And there's like a couple other games like the Super Robot Wars games. Super Robot Wars OG, The Moon Dwellers, and Super Robot Wars V actually had English releases in Asia, but they were also kind of... The Moon Dwellers had a very shaky translation, but it worked. Super Robot Wars V, the translation was fine, and that was an interesting one because Super Robot Wars is this big crossover strategy game with a bunch of different giant robot mecha series. So you have like Mobile Suit Gundam and Gundam X crossing over with Martian successor Nadesco and Evangelion and Shin Getter Robo and Mazin Kaiser, all like crossing over into this one big mecha strategy game. It's a very long-running series, and because different companies have different distribution rights to all these different series in the Western territory, that meant that it could never come to America due to licensing issues. So, Asian English release allowed that to happen, and yeah, Full Metal Panic Fight Who Dares Wins will be getting an Asian English release as well, so that's something to look out for. Also, what was that other game that's getting an Asian English release? I forget. I have to look it up. But anyway, moving along from that, the SNES Classic has sold 2 million units worldwide, so now we know how many they made. Let's just be real here. You sold out. You need to make more. Would have sold more if you made more, but they did make way more than they did of the NES Classic. So we know about that. Also, Super Mario Odyssey sold 2 million units within its first 3 days. I rest my case. So there you go. In stranger news, Steam appears to possibly be cracking down on uncensor patches for adult games. See, there's a few games with adult content released on Steam, but they are censored. But the companies often release uncensored patches that you can download. This came to a head, though, because Darker Studios, publishers of Galaxy Girls, actually said, to quote, "Steam reps have told us that they no longer allow any information or links to the uncensored patches on Steam, so they all had to be removed. We will gradually be updating our own website with info on how to install the patches." Interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, moving back to Nintendo, though, Style Savvy Styling Star will be coming to America, but it will be digital only and on Christmas. This is very strange, and also a very massive departure from what we were just talking about. See, the Style Savvy games are, believe it or not, fashion games for the 3DS. I think there might have been a DS one or two. They're known in Japan as Girls Mode, but they are fashion games that are actually made first party by Nintendo. These are Nintendo games. And they are apparently incredibly successful in Japan. And yeah, they decided to bring them over to America under the title Style Savvy. But it sounds like Nintendo of America has been mishandling them. See, I haven't actually played any of these, but with Styling Star, I was actually like, maybe I'm going to give this one a chance. I'm kind of curious, because this is a first-party Nintendo fashion game. Could be fun. And, like, the new feature for this one is, like, you, like, help different people pick out their clothes and, like, different stories play out depending on what fashion you choose for them. And it has, like, pop stars you help out with big dance numbers. And I'm a sucker for big dance numbers. That's the thing. So it's a very interesting game. And I was like, I think I'll maybe give Styling Star a chance. But for some reason, it's not coming to America until Christmas and digital only. This is strange because it comes out in Europe in like a week or two. Physically. It's getting a physical release in Europe. It's like, what's up with that? And checking the comments on the article for this, people were mentioning that the previous Style Savvy game, which was Style Savvy Fashion Forward, was actually really hard to find a physical copy of, and also had a huge delay in a U.S. release. Again, very strange because these games are coming out in Europe, where they are already translated into English. And if you're wondering why don't you just import a European one, that is because the 3DS is the last region-locked system. Thank freaking goodness it's the last. But yes, the 3DS is region-locked. You cannot play Japanese or European games on your US 3DS. You would have to either hack it or import a European or Japanese 3DS in order to play them. Which is very irritating, especially when Nintendo starts pulling crap like this. So it's odd. It's very odd. And I wonder, I question this hiccup. Also, earlier, this was a thing I meant to mention earlier, but got a little sidetracked. I was mentioning how the Nintendo Switch is very interesting, and how Super Mario Odyssey really shows off what an incredible system it is, both as a system and especially as a portable. Remember, the Switch is way less powerful than the Xbox One or PlayStation 4, but it can be played portably. And having a full, fleshed-out console game in your hands that you can also throw up onto your TV is very nice. And it is one of the rare examples of killer hardware. This is like the literal inverse of what happened with the Wii U. Because usually what happens is a system comes out, and then it's the games that sell the system. I do not main the PlayStation 4, like, of all my consoles, because I like Sony. I have no love for Sony, to say the least. Me and Sony definitely don't get along, and I blame them for actually causing drastic harm to the video game industry with some of their horrible business decisions. But PlayStation 4 tends to get more weird, obscure Japanese games than the Xbox One. Coupled with it having a better interface, I've leaned towards the PlayStation 4, even though I own an Xbox One. Which I picked up to play Crimson Dragon because I love rail shooters that much. Also Killer Instinct, because Killer Instinct is really good. But, yeah, so that's the reason why I lean towards the PlayStation 4. It's the games. The Switch is one of the rare instances where the opposite of this happened. Why did no one buy the Wii U? Because there were no games on it other than first-party Nintendo games. They had to carry the system themselves. The Switch, though, the Switch is selling really, really well, even though its game library is kind of limited. And that doesn't happen. So all the game publishers are kind of scrambling, and they're like, oh crap, people want Switch games. They're demanding Switch games from us. What do we do? And unfortunately, this has had some unfortunate side effects that are very unfortunate, unfortunately. It's unfortunate. Namely, what I'm talking about is that some of the Switch games are Vita ports. Now, I don't mean they were released on Vita first. I mean there are some games where they have a PlayStation 4 and a Vita release, and the version that gets released on the Switch is the Vita version. This is most notable with the upcoming Dynasty Warriors games for the Switch, because they're porting a bunch of them to Switch. Warriors Orochi 3 Ultimate, Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sonata, and One Piece Pirate Warriors 3 will all receive Nintendo Switch releases. Huzzah, I said. However, then I saw a screenshot of One Piece Pirate Warriors 3, and I was like, wait, this looks worse than the PlayStation 3 version. You're porting the Vita version. So, the Switch, even though it could likely handle far better graphics, will be getting an inferior version of One Piece Pirate Warriors 3. And I have a feeling this will apply to the other Warriors games on the Switch, and that's very unfortunate. It's like, can't you at least port the PlayStation 3 version? And this is what keeps happening with the Switch, and it's going to be a bit of a minefield. I actually need to check and see what the deal is with Knights of Azure 2, because if I recall correctly, that probably got a Vita release. And maybe that's what the Switch got. I need to see if there is a drastic graphical downgrade or not. And yeah, this could be a running problem going forward, is if the Switch gets gimped versions of games because they are quick ports. And yes, people still make Vita games. I know, that surprises a lot of people. So that is certainly a word of warning. Having said that, while I was hanging at a friend's house, I got to see Fire Emblem Warriors, and oh egad, I think I need that. That is a Dynasty Warriors game. See, for Fire Emblem Warriors, I don't have much time to talk about it, but they actually did roll in some of those strategy elements. Like, the actual map screen in that game is designed to look like the actual game of Fire Emblem, where it's all grid-based and stuff. But they took it even further. See, if you ever played Samurai Warriors 4, in that game, you got to control two different characters on opposite sides of the map and could command them simultaneously. Fire Emblem Warriors expands that by letting you control 4 different characters all over the map that you can command, on top of letting you command your individual generals that you aren't playing as by pausing the game and going to your strategy screen and telling them, you go here, you fight this general, you go around here. So that is a very interesting strategy element, on top of the fact that it kinda sorta has permadeath. I say kinda sorta because you can resurrect characters, but it costs an arm and a leg. Game also has multiplayer, which makes me happy because a lot of recent Warriors games have been cutting their split screen. And actually, that's going to be an interesting thing to see with the Switch release of One Piece Pirate Warriors 3. Because One Piece Pirate Warriors on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 has split screen, but obviously it has no split screen on Vita. Will there be split screen on the Switch version? How hard will Switch fans be screwed over? We will find out, and I will keep you posted. So I like the Warriors series. I'm on a bit of a Warriors break. I always mention this. You gotta take your breaks from the Warriors series or you will burn yourself out. But I still love those games. Just sometimes you get a little burnt out. I think Berserk and the Band of the Hawk did it to me. That game was not to my tastes. Little slow. So, let's see. Anything else I need? Okay, nothing to report there. Moving on. Bloodborne will be receiving a comic courtesy of, I think it's called Titan Press. Let's see. Titan Comics. It's called Bloodborne: The Death of Sleep. So, Bloodborne fans, that's a thing. I don't know how canon it will be, but I know there's some Bloodborne fans out there, and they will be happy to know Bloodborne's getting a comic. Also, Sayonara Umihara Kawase Plus will be coming out for PlayStation Vita physically, courtesy of Strictly Limited Games, which I've never heard of. This is a very interesting thing to me, because, yeah, that sounds like limited run games, but not limited run games. So is there actually competition for limited run games? We will find out in the near future. Also, Owlboy is getting a physical release. Is only available for computers and also heading to Nintendo Switch. Oh, okay, so I guess the Switch version is getting a retail release. I don't see too much information, but I hear Owlboy is a phenomenal indie game. A lot of people have said very positive things about it. It's good to know it's getting a physical release. And while we're on the topic of physical releases, Nicholas is going to publish a physical edition of Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap for PlayStation 4 and Switch in the first quarter of 2018. Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap was the third Wonder Boy game, and it was on Sega Master System, and it was a neat game. And this crazy French developer decided to go, okay, we're going to take that game. We're going to completely rebuild it from scratch with gorgeous, well-animated HD sprites. And then we're going to let you switch between the original and the new graphics at the push of a button. And same thing with the music. It was kind of cool. And what's interesting about this one is this game already had a physical release, courtesy of limited run games. But now it is going to get a more widespread physical release, but the physical edition will cost twice as much as what it costs digitally to get it right now. Interesting. Moving on, let's talk just a little bit about VR. Quick reminder to anyone on a PlayStation 4 thinking of getting a PlayStation VR, you have less than a week left to grab a copy of Rigs for free through PlayStation Plus. Moving on. There was apparently a Skyrim VR and a Doom VFR stream with Bethesda. I have not watched it yet, but I am hearing some interesting things about it. But mostly, there's a lot of debate on if they have smooth movement or not. It looks like it might still be all teleport movement. This is a beef that a lot of people have with VR games. See, smooth movement makes some people very sick in VR, and so some games have made themselves based on teleport movement. And this is fine when the game was built for teleport movement, but the idea of teleporting across the countryside in Skyrim does not sound very pleasing. Now, you can get smooth movement if you play with a standard DualShock 4 controller, but the question is, can you get smooth movement with the PlayStation Move controller? Will they accommodate for that? And what's more, Doom is sounding like it is going to support the PlayStation Aim controller, which is designed for smooth movement, but we're not sure if there really is smooth movement. We're having a very hard time getting information on this. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of PlayStation VR games were announced at Paris Games Week, and Sony is very much saying that they are in it for the long haul with VR. They will not be abandoning this, which is no surprise. The PlayStation VR has been getting new games every single week, and there are more on the horizon. Let's see, here's a good list. New video games, I'm reading this off of VRFocus.com. New video games that they showed at Paris Games Week include fast travel games Apex Construct, Servios' Sprint Vector, Blood and Truth by Sony London Studio, Megalith, and Bow to Blood, yes, because it's an airship game, that's right. While launch dates were revealed for Moss, Dead Hungry, League of War VR Arena, and Starchild, Ultra Wings, Smash Hit Plunder, and the next Resident Evil 7 DLC, which will support VR, was shown. So, bunch of things. Sony is very much saying we are in it for the long haul. At the same time, the developers of Spark, the world's first virtual sport, have their studio has been shuttered. CCP Games is still in business, but they are closing pretty much their Atlanta studio, which is pretty much their VR division. The exact quote from their CEO, Hilmar Vegar Pettersson, says, "We still believe in the transformative power of virtual reality, not just on gaming, but eventually on society as a whole. Unfortunately, the market for VR games has not materialized how we had hoped." This is slightly disconcerting because Spark is a multiplayer-only game, and a lot of the hope came from the fact that it was going to get a release on PC on Oculus Rift and the Vive. But it looks like the studio is being shuttered before those releases come out. They claim that the PC releases will still come, and this is important because it's supposed to have cross-play with PC, so that would certainly keep the game alive much better. But with the studio being shuttered, that means that it is questionable what kind of updates it is going to get. What's even stranger, supposedly support for the game is being turned over to Sony's London studio, which further raises questions about what the deal is with the PC releases of the game. On top of that, they only had like 2 tournaments for it before they had to do this. It's very sad, especially because Spark is one of the best examples of the true potential of VR and motion control. If you... I don't have the time to go into detail on that one. Point is, I like motion control when it's actual one-to-one motion control and not waggle garbage. And Spark is a true example of that by capturing your real physical performance and transferring that over the internet to make an actual sport you play online. A physical sport that you sweat when you play. I would highly recommend, once again, check out the GameBabble YouTube channel. And I have a video of me streaming the game where I synced up the video feed so you can see picture-in-picture me playing that game. It is very good times. Anyway, yeah, so that is where we are at with that. I hope you have enjoyed the show. I guess I will be signing off and doing our top of the hour personally. Yeah. I am very much a fan of VR, and I think it absolutely has a future, but I do think it is going to be very hard to make money off of VR until it finds its way, which is why VR is very much being supported by indie developers who are so in love with the medium that they just can't give it up, and will make games because they want more VR experiences, and weird Chinese companies with money to blow. There have been a lot of changes in China, it seems, and they are really wanting to get into the video game market. But right now, the main video game market is too crowded. So, yeah. So they are looking into VR as a venue for that. And it's very interesting. And what is this? I'm just checking the PlayStation VR subreddit, and it says, Farpoint Versus Expansion Pack. Announcing the Versus Expansion Pack. This free update brings the most requested user feature by far, player versus player, to Farpoint. The Versus Expansion Pack supports 1-versus-1 gameplay with different enemy AI teammates that the player can spawn and use strategically to gain an advantage. There are 2 PvP game modes, Deathmatch and Uplink. In Uplink, communication relays are dropped into the play area that the player must capture to hold to gain points. Killing other players and enemy AI will also reward points. For both Deathmatch and Uplink, it is a round-based system. You need to win 2 out of 3 rounds on each map to be declared the winner. Each round takes place in a different / separate area of the map. Included in the Versus Expansion Pack. Player XP progression system with unlockable skins, weapon XP progression with unlockable skins. Chaos difficulty co-op games are significantly more chaotic. Easily crouch while sitting using the crouch button toggle. New turning comfort settings. Yes, they can all be disabled. Hooray! New trophies and various bug fixes and improvements. I do not know if that will be free or not, but yay! Versus mode for Farpoint! So there you go. Last piece of news. Thank you so much for joining us here on GameBabble Live. This is 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Here in beautiful Ferguson, Florissant, on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. Thank you so much for joining us here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, and stay tuned for more diverse music for your diverse mind. Coming up next is Broken by Trisha Yearwood, here on 89.5 FM. Thank you so much for listening.